Hello, everybody. Welcome back to this edition of Nobody Likes Recruiters. This is a podcast for you if you want to ace your recruitment game and attract the greatest talent there is out there to attract. And remember to give this podcast a like, share, subscribe, do all those good things because it really helps with the algorithms. In this episode today, this is a very special episode today. As you can see, that's not Steve there. Those of you that are watching, that's Alex. And what we're going to do is we're going to talk specifically about the industrial, manufacturing, and engineering sectors. Okay, so this is a podcast. If you're listening to this podcast and you're looking for advice on how to attract the best talent in those sectors specifically, then you're going to get a lot of goodness from this podcast. Trust me, I am a trustworthy man, aren't I, Lee?
You are indeed, mate. You are indeed. Thank you for joining us, Al.
Yes, thank you.
Logic's leading lady.
Logic's leading lady. What a title.
Yes.
Aren't you Logic's only lady?
Yeah.
Okay, well,
default.
But true, but it's not fake news. It's not fake news, right, Al? So just before we get into this, I think what would be great would be for you to give the listeners and the viewers a bit of an insight into who you are, why you're an authority to talk about recruitment in those areas.
Yeah, okay. So I started in recruitment roughly about 17 years ago.
17 years ago.
Even longer than Steve and I. You were in recruitment before us.
Yeah.
Really?
I know,
So you're a veteran then?
Yeah, absolutely.
You don't look it?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Sort of fell into it really. I think you find a lot of recruiters fall into recruitment. It's not a given chosen career these days, is it? So I started off being made redundant. I was in a position of being made redundant from my job. So I did the tour of the recruitment agencies and stumbled on one that was actually recruiting themselves for a receptionist. So I started there and just basically worked my way up from the bottom, learnt all the ins and outs of compliance and administration, payroll and the temporary worker side of things. So most of my career has been temp.
Okay.
Temp recruitment until I've worked with Logic, which now solely is permanent recruitment. But it's all been industrial engineering, manufacturing, HGV, anything that's, make it work, make it happen.
The heavy lifting.
It's quite interesting because, Al, you're the first person that we brought into the team that's come from an agency recruitment background, isn't it? So as you know, Steve and I, Nathan, all done internal recruitment before.
Yeah.
We're a generalist agency. We did recruit for manufacturing and engineering, but we kind of lacked that in-depth skill set, which is one of the reasons why we looked for somebody with so much knowledge in the area. But also, the fact that you've come from an agency background was, has helped add additional string to a bow, really.
Yeah.
Just on this then, so culturally, have you noticed a big difference now recruiting for permanent staff and then working in this, this side of the tracks as opposed to for an agency and hammering the ball or whatever the
There's a lot of terms, I think.
Yeah.
There's huge differences, like the pace of recruitment, the type of recruitment you do, how you recruit. There's so many differences between temp and perm. Knowing like the candidates, you like there's a term that you put bums on seats in a temp world, and so not like that with permanent. You're recruiting for someone's next stage of their life.
Of course.
It's important to the candidate that you get in their right place to work as much as it's important for the employer to have the right candidate. So there's a lot of different factors in the difference in temp and perm recruitment.
And if you think, Adam, so an employer, if we were recruiting for yourself, a temp employee that you were going to take on, you'll just pay them an hourly rate. The fee's generally paid through the agency. You could finish that employee the next day. There's generally not a great deal of risk from yourself. If you're recruiting for a permanent employee, generally there's a big lump sum. You're invested in that employee. So the recruitment process has to be a lot more in depth. You're taking a bigger risk with the temp employee. They'll fall under your payroll as a business. Whereas temps, they can just be seen as a bit kind of transactional. I need 5 temps starting tomorroh for, 3 months, 6 month period.
They're just to fill a gap, holiday, sickness cover, for example, or, a bit of backlog. They're there to do, a bit of a job, whereas a permanent employee is there to make the business move forward.
So we'll move on from this point in a second, but I just want to dive a little bit deeper. So when you're recruiting for somebody who's a temporary member of staff, I suppose you're not thinking so much about whether or not they're the perfect cultural fit. You just kind of think, have they got the skill set? Can they come in and hit the ground running?
Absolutely, not at all. And sometimes even a good skill set is not something that you have to go in such detail with. It's sometimes take a warehouse operative, for example. Have they worked in a warehouse? Yes. Can they order pick? Yes. Send them in the next day. Are they available? Yes. It does come down to a lot of transaction. It's just transaction with temps and employees with the temp side of things.
So Al, sorry mate, how did you find then the transition to coming and working for Logic when all we know is internal recruitment, so we're quite robust anyway in terms of the process? You've generally recruited temps in the past. How did you find coming onto a permanent only agency? Was it quite a big learning curve?
It was a big step, to be honest. At first I was a little bit naive, thinking it'd be really easy to transition from temp to perm, and it isn't. It's not at all. And I remember when I left my company and said I was going to perm recruitment, it's a different kettle of fish, and it is. Yeah. You don't think it is, but it really is.
Did they try and talk you out of it?
Yeah, 100%, yeah. But that's because they didn't want me to leave, I think. But yeah, it's really different. I was a little bit naive to think it would be quite easy, and my skill set of knowing what I was doing made it easy, but the whole different way of recruiting was a learning curve for me. And learning how to recruit more in permanent terms than temp terms, really.
Great. Okay. Well, good question, by the way. You sure you need to?
Yeah.
You should take over from here.
I'll do the question. I'll take the lead in this one.
So, as I mentioned at the top of the show, this is specifically about manufacturing, industrial engineering type sectors. Is that the right word to use? Would you say sectors or what? Yeah. Okay, because I was asking you before the show, wasn't I? I was saying, is there like a catch-all phrase that I can use for these three industries? And you were like, not really. So what is it though? Because another thing we want to do as well is just kind of hone in a little bit on Stoke-on-Trent. Don't worry if you're listening and you think, well, I don't work in Stoke-on-Trent. You're still going to get plenty of value from this. It's just there. I think you'll be probably giving examples of the situation in the local area, but that's probably relevant for most parts of Britain, one would assume. So what is it about this area that you quite enjoy then?
A lot of it is local heritage more than anything. I'm from Stoke, we live in Stoke, the Stoke people. Most of them are all nice to work with and deal with, happy, friendly people. And this is a bit of the geeky side of me, really. I like to know that what we make and what we do, take pottery, it's a big thing for Stoke-on-Trent, and we've dealt with a lot of pottery firms dealing with, the basic labourers, kiln operatives to some quite high up people in, financial director state. Well, it's like what Stoke-on-Trent does and contributes to the UK economy and manufacturing business, and some things you wouldn't believe are manufactured in Stoke-on-Trent that end up in an aeroplane, for example, and things like that. And it's just like, wow, we've made that. That's what, a bit geeky, but
when we were all on the phone and she's talking, taking a brief from a client or speaking to a candidate, all these different terminologies and words that go completely over my head. But you can tell she's dead excited about it. And I think you do geek out a bit. We were talking before about how stuff works, how stuff's made. You like to go down little rabbit holes, don't you? Really get in the intricacies.
Yeah. And if I don't know it, I go out and research it, and then I'm sitting on YouTube watching videos of, for example, somebody asked me for someone that's done sub-spindling, and I've not seen it exactly used, so I went into it and looked at it and had a look at how it was done, so that when I'm talking to a candidate, I know that they are skilled in that sector and they understand it themselves as well. So I'm matching the right skill set as well. But so it has two benefits really.
That's a really nice point actually. That's a tangible bit of advice if you're recruiting in this area or you've been asked to recruit in this area. You're maybe not familiar with these different terms to go and actually do that. And that's the beauty now of YouTube, isn't it? You can probably go on, search that term, and there'll be multiple videos of people that do that job, telling you about what's actually involved.
Well, I was always under the impression, so working internal recruitment, we recruited everything. Take phones for you, for example, sales, marketing, IT, finance. So you do become a jack of all trade, but a master of none. And I was very much under the impression of, a good recruiter can recruit for any sector to a certain degree until you joined. And then I realised there was so much that I didn't know about manufacturing and engineering. Yeah. And although I can speak to a candidate and assess the skill set, the motivations, are they on the right career trajectory? There's so many other things that there's a different layer of expertise that Al can go with in manufacturing and engineering that takes it to that next level.
So what makes an expert? What makes a good recruiter in this area, Al? What kind of attributes and skill sets do you think that someone has to have to be able to identify that great talent?
A few things, really, I think. Knowing your companies is a good thing. Knowing what they do, what they make, which, once I've built a relationship up with a client and been to site is one of the big important things going in.
She loves getting a hard hat on, don't you?
Love putting my safety boots on. Love
I
it.
wondered what you were going to say there.
Love putting my safety boots on, going into site and seeing the machines work and things that go along with that as well. So knowing what a company does and knowing that somebody's worked at X company is the same as this company is easier then to match the skill set up with the client, the candidate. Knowing as well that your expert knowledge in the area, your expert knowledge of the companies, what they do, expert knowledge going into more detail again of a machine. There's different things, operators, setters, programmers. Somebody comes to you and asks you for a machine op. Well, what kind of a machine op do you want is the next question. Most people would then just send a machine op to him and it's like, oh, I don't need this guy because he can't program. So that's the detail you have to know to go into. So it's just knowing your stuff, basically.
Yeah. Company calls us and asks for a welder.
Yeah.
There's 10 different types of welders. MIG, TIG, you could probably keep going on with the list. There's very much, a lot of intricacies, isn't there?
Yeah.
A lot more than, this is very enlightening for me because there's a lot of things here that you're talking about, different types of welders. And I'm intrigued to know, is there a certain personality type? Are there certain traits that you look for in a candidate where you think, they've got the knowledge, but these traits don't lend themselves necessarily that well to this area or not? I'll put you on the spot with that one.
I don't think so. I think because I've got to know my client, the person that they are, I'll get to know their team leaders, their managers, I'll get to know who they're working with and the team that's in place. If somebody's got the skill but not the right attitude maybe, or, the right approach, then I'll know that they're not the right person for that job. I wouldn't put them forward for someone if they've got different opinion on how things should be done, for example, or they say to me, the reason they left the last job, I fell out with management. We dig into that a little bit deeper. And, so it does all come down to getting to know your candidates on a personal level as well.
And they are the differences, aren't they, I think, between temp and permanent recruitment. Yeah. We build it into the process to dig a little bit deeper. So would you say the quality of candidate that you would get for a permanent member of staff is probably different than a temporary member of staff, isn't it, really?
100%, yeah. So, for example, if I was recruiting a temp welder, temp MIG welder, so you'd get a client come in, I need a welder Monday to Friday, this is the pay rate. So you'd get a welder Monday to Friday, they go 2 weeks, no good for this job, they can't do it. Because you're not trained to ask the intricate questions, the more detail. Whereas when we're doing a job brief, when permanent, I'm usually on site, I'm looking at what they're welding, and because I've done it for so long, I can see that they're just a spot welder. They're just doing little bits of welding, or they're quite a coded welder, which has got different codes to it as well. So you need to know to ask these questions of coded welders. They can assess their work, or they can just put the work on for someone else to assess. So it's knowing all these questions of what the client wants to ask. So
companies that are just on an endless cycle of recruiting temp after temp after temp, a temp being in for 3 weeks, and then temps are more likely to move, aren't they, for 50p more. They'll take the next temp job. They'd probably be better off, investing a bit more in an upfront cost and getting somebody long-term into the business who they can grow, develop, and take that role on.
Yeah. 100%.
Now, I was over my morning coffee this morning. I loaded up YouTube. We've already made reference to this, and I was doing my own research ahead of the pod, and I was specifically looking at engineering. And there was a guy that did a video, and he was talking about some of the issues at the moment with engineering. And it sounds like we've spoken about this at length on this podcast, especially 2020 COVID. It's a bit of sometimes there's a bit of an issue with attrition now in this area. So what advice have you got to maybe business owners in terms of how forget the temp people for a second, those permanent hires, what things can they do to make sure that the hire sticks around? Are there certain things they should be looking for in the recruitment process, Al, do you think?
Well, to attract the right candidate, it's got to be right for the candidate as well. So to recruit, a lot of people, we've touched on this on previous pods, don't advertise properly and things like that. This is what we'd support them with. I'd go in and support on how to advertise correctly, etc.
Yeah.
But to keep your candidate in, you need to invest in them. So not just invest in the recruitment process, invest in the candidate, the onboarding side of, a lot of people have noticed is to complete, don't they, with recruitment. So and keep onboarding. A lot of people don't speak to someone once they've offered till 4 weeks down the line. They've not spoke to him. So keep in touch with them on a weekly basis, or get them excited about joining your company. Keep an eye on market trends. Am I paying my guys the right rate of pay? It's quite hourly rate in engineering manufacturing is an hourly rate. The salaries come with the more technical jobs. So keep an eye on your hourly rates. Are you paying your guys the right market rate, what they're worth? Because like Lee touched on earlier, they will move for slightly different rates, higher rates. I had a counter offer last week for a gentleman who wanted to leave his current company. They offered X amount of pounds. So his company then offered him £2 more to stay, so he stayed. And if they just valued that person in the first place and paid the £2 extra, they would never have had to go through that process. He would never be thinking about wanting to leave. Yeah. It would just stop a lot of, situations developing. Just, are you paying your candidates right?
It's highly competitive at the minute.
Yeah.
There's a massive skill shortage in skilled labour.
Yeah.
So it has created a lot of competition in the market, hasn't it?
Yeah.
What I always say is, first of all, it's always cheaper to retain your current staff than go out there and recruit. And a lot of times people do come to us because of
and less riskier as well, because you know that person.
Yeah.
You're investing in them, you'd like to think.
Yeah, that's it. And a lot of times when engineering or manufacturing clients come to us, it's because somebody's left one of the machines, they've left it till the last minute, and then if that machine's not being operational, then that's going to have a massive impact on the output. Yeah, cost impact. They are very reactive with the recruitment then, and as such, they can't then go out and recruit somebody with the right attitude that they could train. They just say, we need somebody to come in and hit the ground running, which then means, if you want somebody fully skilled, all singing, all dancing, your window of who you can recruit is quite narrow, and then you're forced into this inflated salary. Whereas if they were a little bit more proactive in, forecasting ahead, bringing somebody in with the right attitude and then training them up on the system, then, they'd be in a lot better position.
Al said something really interesting there, where you were talking about, again, keeping these guys around and investing in them. And also, I think, and you said keeping an eye on market trends. That's massive, because then you can communicate to your guys that potentially you've actually got it good here.
Yeah.
Because if you know that the other companies out there are only paying this much, you might be paying slightly above that. Yeah. If you've also got to dial in on how they're being treated, those staff. If there is an offer that comes in, you can say, well, actually, you're
prepared.
You're prepared, so you're aware. Whereas if you're not aware of what your competition are doing in terms of how they're investing in their stuff, you think you've got the best job in the world, and this must happen a lot, right? And then actually, it turns out that if you extrapolate that against the entire market, it's not a great proposition to work for this company, and there are better options out there.
And it's a good thing for us to have in our armoury as recruiters as well. So a lot of companies approach us to recruit and go, I don't know what to pay them. And that's where we have to come in and say, well, we know at the moment average market rate for this is this amount. And we can provide evidence to back that up as well. But knowing in the area, in an engineering company, for example, what a CAD technician is paid, someone comes to me and say, I want a CAD technician for £30,000 that's got 10 years experience, I can say straight away, that's not going to happen, Mr. Client, because, current market is dictating 45, 50 minimum for, 5 years less than that experience. People are jumping straight out of university as a junior on 30, 40k salaries. So this just shows how we can, have an impact into a recruitment process, knowing our industry as well as we do.
They can be bad, some of your smaller manufacturing and engineering companies, particularly smaller ones, that they only have a look at what's out there when they need somebody. So if it's been, 2 or 3 years since the last hire. Well, we've had COVID, we've had recession, everything's changed since then. But it's a good example, actually, Al, of the ceramic company that you went into.
Yeah.
It was the FD who wanted a role recruiting?
Yeah, they wanted one of their high senior management was retiring, so they wanted a replacement for him. But when I went in and sat down with them, we discussed, and I quickly realised that what they were looking for was not going to be out there. This factory manager did everything. And they were very, very lucky to have him on board.
He's been there for about 50 years and one of those employees that just could run knew everything inside out.
He did like 15-hour days, 5 days a week. So he did everything from opening to closing and all in between. So they were never going to recruit anybody on what they were looking for, especially for the salary as well. So we had to look at the company structure and how we could maybe possibly work in 2 different job roles. And I advised how a different person, maybe head of this and head of this, would have the impact of doing both jobs, but also implicating other sides of the business into that role as well. So it had a massive business spread impact to how their business was then functioning moving forward. So it was just the advice that I could sit and give them. They didn't even realise what they were dealing with at the time.
I understand. So we've spoken about some of the other challenges at the moment, i.e. shortages of staff, which is par for the course, I think, for most industries right now. Are there anything else that we can think of in terms of these challenges that the guys listening might be going through at the moment in terms of recruiting in these areas? Al, is there anything else that they should be thinking about that springs to mind or not in terms of challenges?
I think, we discussed like the salary and keeping your employees active in your company. I think as well, like when you're offering, if you're doing some recruitment and you're offering, don't what you've discussed as lowballing before in any podcast lowball them. You know what they're worth, pay them what they're worth. Don't take the risk and think, I'm going to pay them a couple of quid extra lower than what they're worth. Just
is that a common thing that happens in this area? Oh, that's interesting.
And it happens with some of the bigger firms as well. Anything to cut costs down. But one of the most valuable things in a company is your employee. Yeah. What they put in is what you're valuing them as at. So some people sit there and think, well, I don't get paid for this. Why should I do that? But somebody who's being paid what they're worth will go to the end of the earth for the company. Yeah. So, just don't go in thinking that I can get this guy cheaper when you can't. Yeah.
I suppose that speaks to the lack of availability of good staff as well. Yeah. This is certainly a time not to be playing those games, isn't it?
My advice on that would be, and the companies that I see that are doing really, really well, and you can tell the companies that do really well because, they've got a great reputation and they don't regularly sort of recruit at a senior level, is to somehow develop a great employer brand, but also get youngsters excited. Manufacturing and engineering is seen as something that's not quite sexy nowadays. Is it like, they all want to be...
It depends.
To some people. And there are some companies that do it really, really well. And you can see from the advertising campaigns, that the branding that they put out there, the work on LinkedIn that they do to make it exciting. Yeah. And they have a constant flow of... And getting apprentices is tricky, but they've somehow carved...
Attractive.
Yeah, like an attractive proposition.
Well, it is more of a branding thing.
It is 100%.
That the industry is actually interesting and it's quite prestige. I mean, if you're creating engine parts for Airbuses or whatever, that's like a cool job. That's an important job. Yeah. That keeps civilization ticking. Yeah. So,
but that you've just said that from a marketeer. Another way of looking at it, the less sexy way, is, oh, look, it's a massive, big, dirty warehouse with loads of machines going. It's cold. I prefer put a headset on and do something in front of YouTube. But so it's marketing. There's two sides of the coin to look at it. Yeah. And businesses do it well, put that sort of spin on it.
Interesting.
And they are the ones that are,
I am available for... So, if you need to make... your industry sexy, just hit me up.
Introduce the Logic spin-off podcasts.
Al, this has been really, really insightful. Have we got anything that we want to add? Is anything I've not asked you, Al, or not? Because you've done a great job. You've done a really, really insightful. I think. Do you want to just give us like quick synopsis then?
once you get going talking about what you enjoy, you don't shut up about it, do you? And I do enjoy. I enjoy, like Lisa, getting with his vest and boots on, going out to site, and meeting people and looking at them and looking what they do. It's enjoyable, and that's why, at least companies should try to get across to the younger generation. It's not all about gaming and SEO and everything nowadays. We still need people to make things. We still need people to manufacture. You still need somebody to make, the cameras that we're filming on, the keyboards that you're gaming on and everything. Yeah. And that's only done in a manufacturing environment.
Yeah. I think for me, again, I'm kind of a de facto listener here because I didn't know anything about this and I'm learning as I'm going. But one of the best bits of advice that you've given to the audience is to actually get out there. If you're going to recruit in this area and you don't already work in it, we're not talking about a business owner in this area, we're talking about someone that's maybe been asked to recruit. Get out there and actually submerge yourself in the culture of a company and what the job entails, because this isn't something you can really do from afar, and I think that's a testament to you that you've managed to do that.
Yeah, definitely. And invest in training. A lot of companies skip the training side and think training on the job in engineering and manufacturing, industrial is okay. But actually sit your candidates down in a classroom and show them why it's important to know all the boring bits and why it's important to learn the health and safety side of things. And, if you have accident, there's been an accident on site, locally hasn't there, unfortunately. Something's happened to someone. And whereas with your younger generation coming through, as much as an older generation in place, retraining's a huge thing as well. It's all about investing in your workforce and teaching them everything that they could possibly know. It'll only benefit your company moving forward.
Cool. Okay, I think we should wrap up then on that note. That was excellent. If you've enjoyed this episode, please do drop any comments underneath if you've got any thoughts or opinions on what has been discussed in the podcast. Very well done to Alex. Awesome. Your first appearance on Nobody Likes Recruiters, so well done. And I caught that in the corner of my eye. Yeah. For those of you who had only listened to this, the guys just attempted to high five and it went dramatically wrong. They're both better at recruiting, let me tell you. So once again, thank you for listening. I'll see you next time on Nobody Likes Recruiters.
Not only can recruitment be a rather frustrating process, it can also be pretty time consuming. But thankfully, the team at Logic Resourcing can take all that pain away from you. Lots of agencies say that they do recruitment differently. We've all heard it. But as you know from this podcast, both Lee and Steve at Logic genuinely mean it. Now, put it this way, 94%, yes, that's right, 94% of the candidates that they submit attend their interviews. And Logic have a 90% success rate on exclusive assignments. That's pretty impressive. So if you're looking to ace your recruitment, make your life easier, and find those diamond candidates, start by letting Logic take the stress out of all of this for you. Give us a call or email info@logicresourcing.com.